Welcome back to the Compliance Kitchen. Today let's take a look at a recent update from the UK. So this is the UK's OFSI, or the Office of Financial Sanctions implementation. They updated their guidance, sanctions guidance, to particularly applicable to NGOs and charities, charitable organizations. So this is following the August takeover in Afghanistan by the Taliban. As you guys know, Taliban has many of its members listed on various global, such as UN, and also national sanctions lists. But now that they have taken over, you have basically the same group trying to be legitimate, right? And kind of have some semblance of a legitimate government. And so this, of course, adds complexity to what is already a pretty complicated world of economic sanctions, at least in my opinion. Of course, as a member of the UN Security Council, the UK has an obligation to enforce UN sanctions. And so if someone is listed on the UN sanctions list, the member countries can't really allow doing business with that person or entity, or really any transactions that are sanctioned under the UN framework. So the UK has not implemented sanctions against the Taliban as an entity. And in the absence of any derogation in the relevant UN resolution, the UK is unable to grant a humanitarian license as to Taliban. Again, right, following the UN sanctions there. So in this regard, OFSI has published an update on to the charity sector. And so the guidance explains that the UK supports a targeted approach to sanctions. So of course they are effective against sanctions targets, but they're also trying to minimize unnecessary disruption or delay of legitimate humanitarian activity. So the updated charity guidance, just kind of quickly looking at it, includes information on due diligence when using informal value transfer systems, or IVTS, including the Hawala system that operates in Afghanistan. Also a reminder of the UK's ownership and control policy, and highlights of parts of the OFSI's enforcement approach. The due diligence section of the guidance advises that each organization, of course, should assess its own exposure and put due diligence measures in place to manage any risks of breaching financial sanctions. OFSI does not mandate specific measures to be taken, but they can provide guidance as to what measures could be helpful. But of course, the responsibility remains with the charity or the NGO to ensure that it has put in place sufficient measures so that there is no breach of the financial sanctions. Now, the guidance specifically notes that the companies and NGOs should make themselves aware of financial sanctions that are imposed by the UK and the UN and who they impact. OFSI does publish an up-to-date list of those who are subject to financial sanctions in the UK. I have a link to take you to that list posted on compliancekitchen.com if that's something that could be helpful. The next point that OFSI stresses is assessment of all aspects of proposed project, including payment and supply chains, to identify if any partners or financial institutions appear on the sanctions list or are owned or controlled by those who are on the sanctions list. The NGOs and really anyone working with Afghanistan should tailor their compliance approach to the likelihood of dealing with the listed persons or companies, and consider and take steps to mitigate against financial crime risks such as financing terrorism directly or indirectly, corruption, laundering the proceeds of crime, as these all form part of a comprehensive compliance approach. And then, of course, where there are risks, such as project-based and high-risk location, you always want to conduct thorough checks to the extent you can so that you understand who you're dealing with. Check all your payment touch points and also those who are involved in your project on the ground in the country. So those are just kind of main highlights that OFSI included in the guidance. The release also reminds exporters and others who are under the authority of the UK sanctions that in the event there is a suspected or actual breach of financial sanctions, of course there is a necessity to promptly report this to OFSI, and then they review each report on its own merits when they are deciding whether and how to structure an enforcement action or penalty. So again, the press release applies specifically to the Afghanistan situation since about August. Other regimes have different sanctions frameworks in place, and OFSI encourages NGOs to use humanitarian licenses and exceptions that are available whenever that is possible. So if you guys want to take a closer look at the release and also the link to those who are listed on the UK and UN sanctions lists and the updated guidance itself, this is available through hyperlinks on a post on compliancekitchen.com.